to a very, to put it, to a China, you know, which to a country which you can compare to Western countries. It's a very special country, and the fact that you have in China and Beijing a Communist Party ruling the country and letting Hong Kong be remaining somewhat autonomous is kind of exception. And that's why we're having all the problems we've discussed in these two-day conference. Now, I've posed three questions at the beginning of this conference to myself, and I will read them to you, and the answer is pretty obvious. The first one is, has there been any erosion of Hong Kong autonomy in the last 20 years, or in the last few years? And the answer is, of course, yes. Erosion of the autonomy of the community, erosion of the autonomy of the government, and also the rule of law. But it's not really a surprise, I have to say. Maybe the surprise, if you look at it from a different angle, is that the Communist Party has waited for nearly 20 years for imposing more limits upon Hong Kong. Now, the other question is, are we moving from one country to system to one country to one system? I don't think that's the case. I know that there are people in Beijing who would like to move to one country to system, but I don't think it's going to happen. Now, the big question is, of course, what do you put in one country to system? And that's where I think we may disagree, or Beijing and Hong Kong community may disagree. I think it's clear to me that for a few years China has sort of put one country very much ahead of two systems, while a lot of people in Hong Kong still think that two systems is more important and should be treasured and protected. Now, the question, of course, the third question that brings to the third question, which is can Democrats or even the civil society as a whole make a difference and stop this erosion of the Hong Kong's autonomy? I think the answer is, of course, that it's going to be very hard. But I don't think they're going to surrender. I think there are some limits to what China can do. For many reasons we've mentioned, we discussed during the conference, because Hong Kong is a cosmopolitan city, because there are a lot of international interest, because China has a lot of economic interest here as well. So what I foresee more is kind of what I would call a trenchy war, actually, between the establishment of Beijing and the society in the coming years. I think Hong Kong, China's hegemony is going to continue to make progress, but I don't think if the project is to Singaporize, to turn Hong Kong into a new Singapore, as far as the rule of law, democracy, political freedoms are concerned, if that's Beijing's objective, I don't think it's going to fully succeed. For one reason, which is very simple, we discussed yesterday and today, with the fact that Hong Kong, you've got a pretty vivid civil society, and that will remain one of the assets, I think, of Hong Kong, and big differences with any other society. So there will be resistance. Will it be? That doesn't mean that the initiatives put forward by the pan-democrats, or even, let alone the localists or the pro-independence people, are going to succeed. I think they're going to fail. And I don't see the current government or any future Communist Party leadership in China allowing, to be honest with you, allowing Hong Kong to become fully democratic. I think there's a contradiction. Yeah. A one-party system in China can allow some freedoms to remain here, but not with a fully democratic polity to be established and to take leadership. Now, and one of the reasons that we've discussed at length this issue is the fact that you've got a very strong identity. And the more China tries to consolidate the mainlandization of Hong Kong, the more this identity is going to become stronger and more and shared by more people in the community. But at the same time, there are a number of challenges ahead for Hong Kong. The first one, I think, the more immediate challenge is what's going to happen to the pro-independence people. Are they going to survive? Are they going to be repressed? How either Carrie Lam's policy has not been very clear. We've seen a number of decisions made by university presidents, but we don't know exactly what's going to happen later and particularly if it's going to precipitate the enactment of the Article 23 legislation to national security law, which I remember, for those who were here in 2003, was on the books at the time, and was the project was derailed by the civil society, by the fact that we had 500,000 people demonstrating in the street at the time. So the question is, if they put that project on the table again, will it provoke the same kind of reaction from the Hong Kong society? And that's this we don't know. The second challenge is what's going to happen to the activists? Someone mentioned just a few moments ago that more and more people are leaving Hong Kong, and that's an issue. I've seen that not only among activists, but also quite a number of middle-class people. They're just leaving Hong Kong. They're leaving the boat because they don't trust Hong Kong longer. It's still a minority, I guess, but still, that's something we need to watch, and that's one of the challenges ahead, I think, Hong Kong we need to face. Now, the third challenge is this migration wave, well, it's not a wave, but I mean, it's been steady, of mainland Chinese people to Hong Kong. Now, they become Hong Kongese, but at the same time, they're steadily changing Hong Kong's identity. It's still a minority, maybe 1 million of them, among the latest group of refugees, latest group of migrants who migrated Hong Kong after the handover after 1997, but it's going to have an impact on Hong Kong, and we don't know exactly. Now, the economy is doing fine for the moment, but there are a number of social issues, and we mentioned inequalities. My conclusion from the discussion we've had yesterday and today, that inequality, social divide is feeding tensions. But these tensions have been translated into political tensions around identity, against China, around issues of democratization, and around, about the relationship between Hong Kong and the central authorities. Now, one of the other challenges ahead, is the fact that the pan-democrats and the localists are now more and more fragmented. I think this question of political fragmentation is not only a problem for the pan-democrat, I think it's also an issue for part of the establishment. But I see the pan-democrat and the localists much more divided than the establishment can, and that's not going to help Hong Kong regaining more autonomy in the coming years. Now, one thing we haven't discussed very much, that was in the last panel, which we had some very nice slide about how much the Hong Kong economy actually is dominated by Chinese firms. And that's one of the major changes which have occurred in the last 20 years. The fact that half of the stock market, companies which are on the stock market are Chinese now. Half of the construction industry is controlled by mainland Chinese companies, and so on and so forth. So and here you've got a big tension between the Hong Kong society, which is sort of trying to stay autonomous or moving sometimes away from China, but an economy which is more and more integrated with the Chinese economy. And there is no solution here. The economic logic will be that actually the mainland China should prevail and integration should prevail in the longer run. But that's not the case, as you know. It's not that automatic. But beyond that, you've got a tension between internationalization and mainlandization. And here, I think Hong Kong is still, in many ways, international or cosmopolitan society, and to complicate the picture, that's something we haven't discussed too much, a bit in the last panel as well, is the fact that Hong Kong is seen by mainland Chinese authorities as a place where subversive ideas are still pretty influential and may have an impact on China. And that's the last thing China wants, is to turn Hong Kong into a base for subversion. So in this kind of ideological battle between China and about values, political values between mainland China and Hong Kong, beyond that we've got both a value battle, but also a more strategic rivalry between China and the West, and that's very hard for Hong Kong to get out of it, because China sees Hong Kong as part of its territory and sees in Hong Kong a number of influences coming from abroad, which it cannot directly stop, but is trying to neutralize as much as possible. Now, finally, I think one of the challenges we discussed in the last session is the fact that Hong Kong, being part of China, has maybe less to offer as a difference from the rest of China. I have maybe to sort of nuance my remarks about soft power in the sense that soft power doesn't come only from the government, but mainly from the society. And Hong Kong society and civil society is still the major source of Hong Kong soft power, movie and other cultural tools can be also expression of resistance against China and Chinese imperialization of Hong Kong. So I think the game is still open. Hong Kong is certainly used, and I think as Steve said in the last session, by Hong Kong, to promote its own public diplomacy, and I think China and the central authorities are doing it rather efficient work here. But at the same time, you see Hong Kong remaining a pretty pluralistic and distinct society from mainland China. So in other words, we've explored a number of issues in the last 2 days, but there are still a lot of issues we can explore more in the economy and the society, and Hong Kong as what I would call a political community, but also, to use an expression used by Tingwei in the last session, a community of which has its own destiny, which is partly linked to the future of China, but also partly linked to the future of Asia and the rest of the world. So I would close on this note. Would you like to say something?
Yeah, just very few short words after what you said. I wouldn't dare to add too much. I don't consider myself a total specialist of Hong Kong, and so basically, I personally have learned a lot within these 2 days, and I've enjoyed. Yeah. So I was saying that I personally learned a lot within these 2 days, and I've quite liked the way the 4 panels actually articulated together. The first panel stressing mainly, I would say, the role of civil society in Hong Kong and the rule of law, and of course the preservation of this rule of law as something really fundamental. The second panel, I think has articulated very well with today's discussion, especially the complexity of the socio-economic and political economy of Hong Kong, breaking somehow into pieces, some narrative about Hong Kong, about social mobility and so on, and showing really its complexity. And then today, again, I think it was very interesting to see this dialectics of socio-economic factors with cultural politics, and within the process of identification, of identity formation in Hong Kong. And then one last dimension, I think, which was really very interesting, and that comes from the discussion we had related to the situation of asylum seekers, I think, because on the one hand it showed specificity of the Hong Kong situation, which Gordon Matthews very nicely described through his long experience, but at the same time it pointed somehow to the trivialization, and because somehow Hong Kong is no different in respect with these issues of how the authorities manage migration flows, how there is some kind, because if you compare with the way, especially in Europe, for instance, global cities, basically you see a lot of parallels. The way there is some kind of hypocrisy in the way the status quo in terms of, let's say, political, legal arrangements or assemblage or dispositif, if you want. Yeah? There is some kind of status quo, and everybody, many people would prefer to remain within the status quo, and at the same time, it's also because it touches the very heart of the state, which is sovereignty. because modifying, for instance, touching issues of asylum, the status of asylum seekers, Geneva Convention, means basically modifying the very stuff of sovereignty. And this is a very, very sensitive topic. And in this extent, I would say it's also showing, Hong Kong as a nation state with very similar issues that we're and as a part of the global processes. Yeah. So I wouldn't like to add too much. I think you've really done a great job at summarizing many aspects of these 2 days, and I would like to thank the speakers who are still here and also the public for the excellent discussion. And again, thank you very much to Hong Kong Baptist University and your department and all your team for all the wonderful work.
Well, thank you, Eric. I would like to thank the CFC and Eric, who, as I said at the beginning, were the initiator. He's the one who had the idea of putting together this conference. Not in June, by the way, not in June or July, at the time of the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the handover, but in the autumn, in September, when we come back to the university, we can think about this issue in a calmer environment. I mean, actually, it's not quite from a political point of view, but it's somewhat detached from the political event which took place in late June, early July. So I think we had a terrific conference. I think it's just the beginning of a frequent conversation on many aspects of Hong Kong, and we'll continue to have this conversation maybe and explore more issues in the coming years. So thank you again for all coming. Some of you coming from afar, like Sebastien and Marty is not anymore here. He's here, okay. And I know that Michael Davis is having a rest because he's pretty much just live, but he is with us with his heart. And thank you for all of you for coming and staying until the end of this conference. Thank you again.